let's move things along. And Vince Guzzo is on the line. Of course, he is the CEO of Cinema Guzzo. Vince, thank you so much for coming on the show on this Easter Monday.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Les. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, the last time you were on the show, I think we had just a wonderful conversation about the entertainment world and box office numbers and if the industry is going to come back. I should point out that it was a good weekend for the box office. Those that are open. That Godzilla movie, King Kong versus Godzilla, did very well. Is that another hopeful sign that you have for the future of the industry?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I mean, 43 million for North America, 3-day Easter weekend. I mean, I got to be honest. I think the movie did what it's supposed to have done. Whether you want to call it post-COVID, pre-COVID, whatever. I mean, that's the kind of number that movie would have made, in my opinion. So I think they're close to 100% of what they would have normally done on a pre-COVID. So I think it's great. I think, and you have to remember, not all theaters are open yet, right? I mean, some of them are not being how can I say? They're not being open in the same way, right? Some of us don't have no food or whatever. So that'll change the numbers.
I think it has a lot to do with the U.S. and their vaccination situation. That campaign has been going swimmingly for the United States. And I want to point this out. Yesterday in the U.S., they reported 277 deaths. This is a country that was at 5,000 on some days just a couple of months ago. So the vaccination campaign is working there, and it's leading to more things being reopened, and I guess those box office numbers. Now, at the end of our last interview, Vince, and we talked about entertainment, I said, the next time you come on, let's talk about politics. And one of the reasons I said that to you was because I follow you on social media. It's very clear that you are becoming more and more political. You've actually put your support in this province behind a party that does not have a lot of followers, the Conservative Party of Quebec, and their leader, Eric Duhem. And I want to ask you, why are you wading into the political realm so much? Why is that a move you've made?
Because I think what's going on is that a lot of, let's call us business people or, I'm going to use the word very loosely, celebrity business people, what we're being told in Quebec, at least for many, many years, is you're not allowed to get involved. You've got to let other people, it's almost like political was the realm of non-business people. And so one of the things I pointed out a few days ago on another radio interview was you've got to be careful if you want the expertise of business people, that means you've got to get their expertise from day one, because not all business people will want to get involved, but it's just not normal that somebody who has achieved a certain amount of success or a certain amount of credibility in the business world is not allowed to comment what would be best for the political situation in our country, right? So, and it's not about subsidies or whatever, because, I'm one of those who's always been against handouts to corporations or whatever when they don't need it. But so I've decided that in a slow manner, but now unfortunately the COVID has accelerated my slow manner, would get involved and would give my opinion not only on entrepreneurship or the business world, but also on politics, right? And I think it's important to realize that you're not going to make, life's not going to be better off by making everybody more poor. And so we've got to find a way, ultimately, to coexist and realize that the opposite ends of the poles. One of the things that really got me involved is I saw how extremist the two sides were being, the left and the right, were being pulled towards the extreme end. And I'm looking for a balanced middle that can use both philosophies and intertwine them together. So my involvement comes more from saying you can be a politician, you can be a businessman, and those two fields could actually work together, and we could actually learn from both sides instead of just making it that if you're a businessman, that makes you an evil, mean capitalist versus, a saintly politician.
We're with Vince Guzzo, the CEO of Cinema Guzzo, talking some politics here. So listen, Vince, I love what you just said about balance, right? And you mentioned, the sort of extremes. And I feel that's, part of the thing about being, a celebrity business man like yourself, you've got some weight to throw around on that end when it comes to bringing people together. But you have been supporting, Eric Duhaime, a guy that is, a lot of people would say is on one of those extremes. So how do you square that circle?
Well, so first of all, the problem is only because the left or people call you an extremist doesn't make you an extremist, right? So let's get that clear. I mean, I've made my comments about how the pandemic has been handled. That doesn't make me a complotist, as we would say in Quebec. On the contrary, I believe in COVID. I know it exists. I don't believe in a world conspiracy. As I said in a joking way on another radio show once, I said, I've met way more politicians in my life than I thought I would ever meet, and I can guarantee you there is not a high enough IQ level there to organize a world, a world structured complot against humanity. Okay, so I'm trying to get everybody to understand that only because you're angry, only because you're pointing out the obvious and you disagree with those people, doesn't mean that those people are extremists or they complotists, as we would say, right? So
sure. But
I'm no Donald Trump, and neither is Eric Duhaime. What I do appreciate about Eric Duhaime is I want you to realize that he is one of the rare politicians in 2021 who is openly gay, had no issue saying it. And you have to remember, it's very important for people to realize that only because you're a conservative doesn't make you anti-gay. The fact that he's a conservative, he's openly gay, and he says it and he admits it, for me, that's a sign of honesty.
Sure.
The first thing we need to change in politics is to have more honest people.
Now, the one thing, Vince, I get what you're saying, right? And this can't be just made into, it's conservative equals bad. But if you look around the world, right, the countries that have handled the pandemic the best are the ones where citizens trust government, that they believe the government will do the right thing. And sometimes I feel that your social media wades into we can't trust the CAQ ever, you can't trust the government ever, the government's always trying to do the wrong thing. And that's where I get a little skittish, Vince. It's not the right versus left. It's that at the end of the day, you have to have a bit of trust in government for society to move forward.
Right, and this is where now the big difference is. I want you to realize that the CAQ is closer to the right, which is call it a conservative mentality, which is where I would be. So you would think I would blindly trust the CAQ and go along with them. The truth of the matter is very simple. If I don't trust that government anymore, it's because they've proven to me that they can't be trusted. Meaning what? Meaning that when a premier openly says, we are following public health recommendations, and then I know, because I've seen the reports, public health recommendations do not say to close movie theaters or restaurants or whatever in October, but yet we did. And then when in January finally or February finally the government is pressured into revealing that it did not follow those recommendations because Arruda went to the National Assembly and said, no, I did not recommend this. It was a political decision to close restaurants. That means that the government has repeatedly, whether it's a right-wing government or a left-wing government, has repeatedly lied to us. And the more a government hides stuff, the more a government does not want to share a plan. And you have to remember, it's a plan. As an accountant, both Premier and Minister of Health should know that the first thing you ask anybody is, what's your plan? What's your forecast? What's the idea? How do you think we're going to get out of this, right? And the fact that they still do not have a plan or will not share the plan, and the fact that they're still using rhetoric like, what could we have done better? Or we thought we did an amazing job. But guys, I don't know if you realize it, but in not so many ways, it's a very Trumpish way of presenting the media.
What do you think of how Ontario is handling things, if that's your take on Quebec? Because in Ontario, it's a lot worse.
Well, I don't know if it's a lot worse. I can tell you that Doug Ford had the humility of saying, hey, we made a mistake, and we're adapting, and you know what? We don't have all the answers to this. None of us have been in a pandemic before. There was a certain humility in their mistakes, which we did not get from the CAQ. And like I said, I mean, there's so much similarity between, without necessarily being loudmouth about it, there's so much similarity between Donald Trump's way of tooting his horn and what this government has done in Quebec. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we saved lives. Is that what he said? I think he said we saved lives by being strict No, in reality, you didn't save any lives because you have no proof of that. What we do have a proof of is that you brought people to the brink of crackdown, and they've just had about enough, and now you're worried that they won't follow your next, series of closures or recommendations. But the problem is that, in some sense, the WHO has said it. It said lockdowns are not a good idea. They are a last resort move, which means you do them 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then you reopen everything so that you give some breathing room to people. I mean, Christ, it's written in English and in French. Both governments here should be able to understand that lockdowns have been proven not to work except for extreme measures. So,
Vince, I got to leave it. I got to leave
now.
I got to leave it there. We're not under a lockdown in this province, but I do have to leave it there. Thanks for coming on, and come back real soon. We'll catch up on this one more time. Vince Guzzo, the CEO of Cinema Guzzo.